This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. All right, so have you ever wondered if your genes could actually influence what you end up doing for a living?
You mean like if you're destined to be a doctor or an artist or...
Yeah, kind of like in that movie Gattaca, where your whole future is basically mapped out by your DNA.
Yeah, I remember that movie. Kind of creepy, right?
Totally. But there's this new study in Nature Human Behaviour, and it's got us asking, how much of that sci-fi stuff is actually rooted in reality?
It is pretty wild. They took data from two massive biobanks, the Million Veteran Program and the UK Biobank.
Wow, so we're talking...
Almost 500,000 people.
500,000. I mean, that's a huge data set.
Yeah.
Did they find any, consistent patterns across different cultures? You know, it's one thing to say genes influence career choices, but do those influences hold true across the globe?
That's a really good question. And to be honest, this particular study doesn't dive into that.
Oh, okay.
It really focuses on establishing whether there's a connection at all.
Gotcha.
And to do that, they use something called polygenic scores, or PGS.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't geneticists, break that down. What are PGSs and how do they fit into all of this?
So imagine a PGS as like a genetic calculator.
Mm-hmm.
It basically estimates a person's predisposition to specific traits.
Okay.
In this case, they looked at neuropsychiatric traits like ADHD or autism.
Interesting.
It's kind of based on those GWAS studies, the genome-wide association studies where they scan the DNA of tons of people looking for tiny variations that are linked to a certain trait.
Yeah.
A PGS kind of takes those variations and calculates a score suggesting how likely someone is to express that trait.
So it's not like there's one single gene for I don't know, being a musician or something.
Right, exactly. It's more about tons of tiny variations adding up to sort of a nudge in a certain direction.
Okay, a nudge. I like
Yeah, and it's super important to remember PGSs are not destiny.
Right.
Our environment, our choices, our experiences play a much, much bigger role.
So you're saying even if someone has a PGS that suggests they might be predisposed to a certain career, it doesn't mean they're going to end up there. Free will still exists.
Absolutely. Think about it this way. If you're naturally athletic, you might be drawn to sports. But that doesn't guarantee you're going to be a pro athlete.
Yeah.
Right? You still need to train, practice, make a ton of choices along the way.
Makes sense.
Same goes for these genetic predispositions. They might give you a little nudge, but you're ultimately the one steering the ship.
Okay, so we've got this huge data set. We've got our PGSs. What did the researchers actually find when they looked for these genetic nudges influencing career choices?
Well, they focused on people 30 and older figuring. By then, most people have kind of settled into their careers.
Yeah.
And they did find statistically significant links between certain neuropsychiatric PGSs and specific jobs, but...
So there's always a but.
But these links were really, really weak.
How weak are we talking?
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Yeah, less than 1% of the variation in people's careers could be explained by these genetic nudges.
So basically, almost nothing.
Pretty much. To put it in perspective, things like your age, your gender, your socioeconomic background, your education, those have a way bigger influence on your career trajectory.
Okay, so we're not living in Gattaca just yet.
Not quite.
Phew. But, okay, 1%. Even if it's tiny, it's still something, right? What kind of links did they actually find? Give us an example.
Sure. So one example is there was this marginal link between a higher PGS for ADHD and a slightly higher chance of working in creative fields.
So does that mean everyone with ADHD is destined to be an artist?
Well, not necessarily, and that's where things get really interesting.
I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but just because you see a link between two things doesn't mean one actually causes the other? Or...
Exactly. Correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because there's a slight connection between, say, a certain PGS and a certain career, doesn't mean that one directly causes the other. There could be a whole bunch of other things going on.
Okay, so if it's not ADHD making someone more creative, what else could it be?
Well, it could be that, certain personality traits that are often seen in people with ADHD, like maybe a tendency towards nonlinear thinking or a higher tolerance for risk, those traits might make those individuals a better fit for certain creative fields.
So the ADHD itself isn't the driver, it's these other things that might come along with it.
Right, exactly.
That's really interesting, but how do we even begin to, like, tease those threads apart? It seems like it'd be so hard to separate what's genetic from what's, environmental.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the biggest challenge with this type of research. You've got nature and nurture all tangled up together. Think about it. If someone is drawn to creative pursuits early on in life, they're more likely to seek out environments that foster those interests, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that leads to further development of their creative skills. So then, are they in that creative field because of some genetic nudge? Or because of years of experience and practice? It's probably a combination of both.
So it's like this feedback loop where genes might play a tiny role at the beginning, but then everything else gets piled on top, and it becomes almost impossible to isolate that initial genetic influence.
Precisely. And that's why it's so crucial to not overinterpret these findings. You can't just look at someone's PGS and say, oh, you've got a slightly elevated score for ADHD. Guess you're meant to be a painter.
Right, like a genetic career fortune cookie.
It's just not that simple.
That would be a really limiting way to view things, too, both for individuals and for, society as a whole. Like, what if we started slotting people into these predetermined boxes based on these tiny genetic whispers? We'd miss out on so much potential.
Yeah, for sure. This research shouldn't be about putting people in boxes, but about understanding the subtle ways our genes might interact with our environment and choices to shape our lives.
I like that. It takes away the whole determinism thing.
And honestly, this study only scratched the surface of what's possible.
Really? How
Yeah.
so?
Well, they only looked at a very specific set of neuropsychiatric traits. I mean, there's a whole universe of other genes and traits that could be at play, each with their own little whispers, right?
It's true. And who knows what they might be saying?
And they also only focused on career choices. What about all the other aspects of our lives? Our relationships, our hobbies, our personalities. The possibilities for future research are huge.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the main takeaway here isn't that our genes dictate our destiny. It's more like they add, I don't know, a bit of background noise to the symphony of our lives.
I love that analogy. And even though that background noise is subtle, it's still worth exploring.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe by tuning into that subtle noise, we can learn something new about ourselves.
Yeah, and think about it like this. If we can get a better understanding of these subtle genetic influences, we might be able to create more personalized educational and career counseling programs.
You mean tailored advice based on someone's genetic predispositions?
Exactly. Imagine being able to identify early on those who might benefit from a different learning approach or a specific type of mentorship. We can help people find careers that actually align with their natural inclinations, and that could lead to greater job satisfaction and overall well-being.
Okay, that's a really cool thought. It's not about using genetics to limit people's options, but to expand them, to give people more tools and more insights to kind of navigate their own path.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual benefits. If we can understand how these tiny variations contribute to things like job satisfaction or workplace performance, maybe we can design more effective team-building strategies or even rethink how we structure entire organizations.
Whoa, you're talking about using these insights to reshape workplaces. That's thinking big.
Well, I think it's important to consider all the potential implications of this research, both on an individual level and a societal level. And while this particular study focused on, established careers, it would be really cool to see future research explore how these genetic nudges might influence things like career exploration and decision-making way earlier in life.
Do teenagers gravitate towards certain types of summer jobs or internships based on their PGSs? That would be so interesting to see.
Exactly. Or do certain PGS profiles correlate with a greater openness to trying new things or a higher tolerance for career uncertainty? There's so much we don't know.
So much more to learn. It's like this research has opened a whole new door to understanding how people behave and make choices. It's not about taking away free will, but adding another layer of complexity to the picture.
And that complexity is what makes it so fascinating. This study really shows just how intricate the interplay is between our genes, our environment, and the choices we make. It's a good reminder that we're not just products of our DNA. We're active participants in shaping our own destinies.
Okay, so I'll admit, when we started this deep dive, I was kind of nervous. The whole genes influencing our careers thing sounded a bit like a sci-fi dystopia, But honestly, after unpacking the study, I'm feeling pretty optimistic.
I agree with you. I think this research is ultimately hopeful. It's not about limiting our potential, but about understanding ourselves better, so we can make more informed choices.
It's like instead of fearing our genes, we can learn from them.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And the more we understand about how our genes, our brains, and our environment all work together, the better chance we have to create a future where everyone can thrive.
I love that. So for our listeners out there, if you want to dig into the details of this study, you can find the full paper over at Nature Human Behavior.
It is a good read.
It is. And as you continue on your own career journeys, whatever those may be, just remember, you are not defined by your DNA. You're the architect of your own life.
Think about it this way. If we can get a better grasp on these subtle genetic influences, we can maybe create better, more personalized educational programs.
Oh, yeah.
And career counseling, too.
You mean like give people advice that's actually tailored to their genetic predispositions?
Exactly. Like imagine if we could identify early on the people who might learn better with a different approach or who would really benefit from a certain type of mentorship.
Yeah.
We could help people find careers that really, truly align with their natural tendencies.
Yeah.
And that could mean, more job satisfaction and better overall well-being for everyone.
That's a really cool thought. It's like we're not using genetics to box people in. We're using it to like open up more possibilities.
Exactly. And it's not just about like individual benefits either.
Oh.
If we could start to understand how these tiny little variations in our genes can contribute to things like how satisfied people are with their jobs or how well they perform in the workplace,
Yeah.
we might be able to come up with more effective strategies for building teams or even rethinking how we structure like entire organizations.
Whoa, you're talking about using these insights to like reshape entire workplaces. That's huge.
Well, I think it's really important to think about all the ways this research could impact things, both for individuals and for society as whole.
Yeah, definitely.
And while this particular study focused on, careers that are already established,
Right.
I think it would be super interesting to see more research on how these genetic nudges might influence how people explore career options and make decisions about their careers, like much earlier in life.
Yeah, like do teenagers gravitate towards certain summer jobs or internships based on their PGSs? That would be fascinating.
Exactly. Or, like, do people with certain PGS profiles tend to be more open to trying new things?
Oh.
Or are they better at dealing with the uncertainty that comes with choosing a career path? There's so many questions to answer.
It's like this study has opened up a whole new world of research.
Yeah.
Like it's not just about taking away free will, it's about adding another layer of complexity.
And that complexity is what makes it so exciting to study. This study really shows just how interconnected everything is, our genes, the environment, and the choices that we make.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we're not just, puppets controlled by our DNA.
Yeah.
We're actively involved in creating our own futures.
Okay, so I have to admit, at the beginning of this deep dive, I was a little freaked out. The whole genes influencing our careers thing sounded a bit too much like a sci-fi dystopia.
Right.
But honestly, after talking about this study, I'm feeling pretty optimistic, actually.
I agree with you. I think this research is ultimately a good thing. It's not about putting limits on what we can do. It's about understanding ourselves better.
Yeah.
So we can make smarter choices.
It's like instead of being afraid of our genes, we can actually learn from them.
Exactly. The more we know about how our genes and our brains and the environment all work together, the better chance we have of creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to really thrive.
Beautifully said. Well, for our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about the nitty-gritty of this study, you can find the full paper over at Nature Human Behavior.
It's definitely worth a read.
It is. And as you all continue on your own career journeys, just remember, you're not a prisoner of your DNA. You're the architect of your own life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Your genes might give you a little nudge here and there, but you're the one holding the map, and you get to decide where you want to go.
Love it. Well, that's it for today, folks. Until next time, keep on diving.